Hello, and my name is Robbie Ferry from Girl Bike Club. And in this video today, we're going to be talking about tips and tricks to make your turbo trainer quieter. So when people first get a turbo trainer, they do get surprised at how noisy they can be. But it doesn't have to be that way, and there's some really easy, simple ways to fix it. Before we go into that though, it's important to talk about why your turbo trainer is noisy in the first place. So your indoor training setup being quite loud comes down to a few different things. So first thing to mention is bikes aren't actually that quiet when being ridden. Although when out on the road they seem very quiet, typically that's because there's so much wind noise. The next thing to mention is turbo trainers. Turbo trainers do have to create a lot of resistance, and resistance and friction doesn't come without noise. The last thing to mention though, and probably the most prominent factor when it comes to noise and turbo trainers, is the vibrations. So you putting your bike into a stand and riding it creates a lot of vibration, and this can create a lot of noise if you don't find ways to stop it. So let's go into our methods of getting your turbo trainer set up as quiet as possible. So the first thing to mention is there are different types of turbo trainers on the market. So the two you will see are what we call direct drive and wheel-on turbo trainers. So this one here is what we call a wheel-on turbo trainer. The reason it's called that is because when you put the bike into it, the back wheel stays on. Typically, these are very cheap turbo trainers, they're very basic, and they are very noisy. So, because there's more moving parts, like the wheel, and because they are on a smaller base, you will find these to be much noisier than the direct drive. Then you have direct drive turbo trainers, just like this one. So, typically, they are harder to set up because you have to take the wheel off your bike and attach the turbo trainer to your bike itself. But the experience is much better with a direct drive turbo trainer. It's much sturdier, there's less vibrations, and because typically most direct drive turbo trainers are smart trainers, you can use applications like Zwift very easily. Out of the two, you are going to find that these direct drive trainers are much quieter. They just create much less vibration compared to the wheel-on trainers. A clean bike is a happy bike, and this is vital when it comes to turbo training. So before you put your bike on the turbo trainer, you're going to want to remove all bags. You're going to want to make sure nothing is loose and is able to rattle, like bottle cage bolts. And also, you're going to want to degrease that chain. Get all the dirt and grime off, and if you can, get some dry lube on instead. And this is going to make your bike a huge amount quieter than you might expect. So now your bike is nice and clean, you've got everything you can off it, and it's in the turbo trainer, you're just going to want to make sure that this through axle or quick release at the back is up nice and tight. A very common problem I see in noisy turbo trainer setups is people just not tightening up their bike enough. So now we need to speak about location, and the location of your turbo training setup is vital to the noise it's going to make. So a really good example of this is I used to live in a 2-story house. On the top floor it had wooden floorboards, and on the bottom it was a concrete base. When I had my turbo trainer in one of the upstairs bedrooms, I found that the wooden floor actually amplified the noise all around the house to the point of where my neighbours next door could tell when I was training. When I moved it down the stairs to the bottom on the concrete base, it absorbed so much more of the noise to the point of it made it half as quiet as it was before. So, I know we don't all have the option, but if you do have the option, try and keep your bike on the ground floor on a concrete base rather than wooden floorboards. If you do have wooden floorboards and that's your only option, then the next step is going to be vital to keeping your turbo trainer as quiet as possible. So the next thing we need to talk about is padding. And padding is vital when it comes to getting your turbo trainer set up as quiet as possible. So when I speak about padding, I'm speaking about putting something between the turbo trainer, the bike, and the floor. So you will see a lot of turbo trainer mats online, and they are very thin. We're talking 1 or 2 millimeters thick, and yes, they will protect your floor from sweat, and they will dampen the noise a little bit. But going for something a little bit more heavy duty will go a very long way. So a really good example is what I use. So my current turbo trainer setup is actually on gym flooring. So that looks a little bit like this. So this is an old piece I have, it's a little bit cut up, but it's extremely thick, soft material. And what this does is not only does it make it comfortable for me to sit on my floor and do core work, it completely removes all the noise from my turbo trainer setup. Because it is so spongy and because it's so absorbent, what I find is it completely takes all those vibrations and takes away all that noise. This stuff is very cheap to buy as well. So you're looking roughly around $10 for a meter squared of this, and you can get away with 2 or 3 meters squared. This is a fantastic way of making your turbo trainer as quiet as possible, and don't be scared to really raise it off the floor. So for example, this here is just over 1/2 inch thick. If I was in a place living in an apartment or somewhere where I needed to really dampen it, I wouldn't be scared to be using 2 or 3 on top of each other to really dampen that noise. But the difference it makes is phenomenal, and it costs next to nothing to do this dampening. So the final thing to speak about is ERG mode. So you might have heard of ERG mode before. This is something which you will see on many of the smart applications for your training, such as Zwift. So ERG mode creates the resistance and automatically adjusts it for you. So for example, if you wanted to do intervals, you could put it into ERG mode and it could put you in a recovery position, and it could put you into a position of high intensity while you're riding. This is a great tool for making your bike much quieter though. So you will find when riding your turbo trainer, the noisiest time to be riding it is when you're in the bottom cog or the top cog. So if you were to use ERG, it actually gives you the ability to leave it central in the automatic resistance to do the work for you instead of you having to change gears. This means in the central cog, it's going to be much quieter, much smoother, and it creates much less vibration. So if you can, using ERG will make your bike so much quieter because it means you can keep that chain line as central and straight as possible. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Make sure to subscribe to the Girl Bike Love channel, and we will catch up soon.